As I was praying and thinking about what I was going to speak about tonight, it became abundantly clear that I must speak about the gospel of life and proclaiming the gospel of life because of the fact that Blessed John Paul II will be declared a saint this coming Sunday. And at Family Life International, we have 3 John Paul II Centres for Life throughout New Zealand. And I also have a very personal devotion to John Paul II. That is another story. So, he is a man who fearlessly proclaimed the dignity of the human person, and he also taught us about the theology of the body. So tonight, I wish to share with you my passion for proclaiming the gospel of life, while giving you an overview of the current situation out there and what we at Family Life International are doing, in part, to promote life, faith and family in this country. All the while, I would ask you to consider the role that you play in building a culture of life. Blessed John Paul II tells us that the mission of proclaiming the gospel of life in the world and to every creature is especially pressing because of the extraordinary increase and gravity of threats to the life of individuals and peoples, especially where life is weak and defenceless. The gospel of life was written almost 20 years ago, and of course since that time it has become even more urgent, and the threats against life have increased significantly. So the urgency with which we must act is critical. There are many issues that we could discuss today, and I had a really hard time trying to cross them off the list and decide what it was that I was actually going to talk about. I decided to mainly focus on abortion tonight, but I will also discuss a few other issues after that that I think I need to bring to your attention. So beginning with abortion, this coming December marks the 37th year since the passing of the Contraception, Abortion and Sterilisation Act, and as well as the amendment to the Crimes Act, and that was in 1977. And that allows abortion in our land. It has been a long struggle to protect innocent human life, and it still continues. How is it that we can allow 14,745 unborn children die every year because of choice? It is absolutely heartbreaking, and while these numbers are coming down, one is too many. Just about everyone knows somebody who has had an abortion, the hurt that a woman feels. Despite it being so commonplace, we don't talk about it for fear of offending somebody. Even within our church, there are those who are misguided into believing that sometimes abortion is a necessary evil. You know, for instance, if someone is diagnosed with a lethal or even a non-lethal fetal anomaly prior to birth, quite often people think that's okay to have an abortion in that situation. At our Family Life Crisis Pregnancy Centres, we see women of all ages thinking that the only choice they can make is to end their pregnancy through abortion. They believe this because of their circumstances, because of a lack of support, because of a lack of options given. When they discover that there are other options and that there are people that want to walk with them, not just now, not just until baby's born, but for however long is required, then they have a glimmer of hope. In that moment, they can choose the only thing that a mother's heart wants to choose, and that is life. Right now, our Family Life Crisis Pregnancy Centres in Auckland, Wellington and Dunedin are looking after lots and lots of women, and we have 15 babies due in the next little while. Last year, 4 of our mothers chose adoption for their babies, and they are now thriving with their adoptive families. What a selfless and beautiful act of love. Over the years, our centres have literally saved hundreds of mums and bubs from abortion, and it is such a privilege to be able to serve in this way. One of our babies, Benedict, is now being investigated by the Vatican in regard to the cause of sainthood for Mother Adele Garnier, who is the foundress of the Adorers of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the Tyburn nuns. You see, Benedict was initially saved from abortion through our Auckland centre, but later on in this mum's pregnancy, it was discovered that the baby had a condition, and I'm very terrible at saying it, holoprosencephaly, which basically means his brain was not developing correctly, and as the doctors explained to her, he had no brain. The doctors said there was nothing there. And the scans kept saying the same thing over and over again. This mother was distraught, and she thought, what was she to do? The doctors kept telling her, you need to abort this baby. You have to abort this baby. It is so cruel to let him continue. And they were really rude and arrogant to her. Colleen, our director, bundled this young mum up and took her out to the Tyburn monastery. There, she prayed, she poured her heart out, she asked God to heal her child. When she came away, she had the courage to continue. At that time, the nuns were praying, we were praying, everyone was praying, and we asked the intercession of Mother Adele Garnier. So as it turned out, she continued with the pregnancy, and then the baby was born. The missionaries of charities came out to baptise him because he wasn't supposed to live. And Colleen was at home asleep that night, and at 3 a.m. she woke up and she saw a vision of a nun standing over a little child, a little baby, and the nun was smiling, and Colleen knew at that point that everything was going to be okay. And you know what it was? This baby boy was born kicking and screaming and so hungry, and there was nothing at all wrong with him. So we don't know what God has in store for this little boy. We don't know whether his life and healing is going to be declared a miracle by the Vatican. But we do know that God was there and heard the prayer of his mother that day and the blessings that he has given that family. This leads me to the point that at Family Life International, we understand that we can only serve with love by immersing ourselves in prayer. Prayer is at the very heart of everything we do, and in fact, our Chapel of the Annunciation actually is in the heart of our John Paul II Centre for Life in Auckland. Because prayer is at the heart of our mission, it was a very logical step to take on the 40 Days for Life vigils. These vigils began in 2004 by the Coalition for Life in Texas. Not knowing what more they could do to motivate people and to work and to end abortion in their town, they decided they needed to pray. So they sat around, they prayed for an hour around this table, and at the end of that hour, they knew that they had to place their trust in God. And from that, they decided that they would pray outside their local Planned Parenthood facility 24/7 for 40 days. The vigils went nationwide in 2007, and now they have gone all around the world, and there's people doing it all the time. In 2009, the clinic director of that first Planned Parenthood facility left and became a powerful pro-life advocate. Some of you may know who this person is, Abby Johnson. She was to be here this weekend, but she is due to give birth any week now, and so it was impossible for her to come out. But even more amazingly, that clinic closed last year for good. Many good and faithful people have prayed for many years in our churches, outside the abortories, in their homes, and their prayers and peaceful witness have been heard and answered. I have to say there's something really special about praying for 40 days straight outside the place of death, uniting our prayers not only with those present, but those who are housebound or able to attend because of practical reasons. It's really powerful. But the awesomeness of this event really comes into its own when you realise how many people are praying simultaneously throughout the world for the same intention. This year, there were 253 40 Days for Life locations in 11 countries. God is always faithful. He hears the prayers of those who in great humility place their trust in him. This past Lent has been no exception. To date, there are 661 unborn children who have been saved from abortion through the 40 Days for Life campaign. 2 of them, I am pleased to say, are from our own city here in Auckland. Thanks be to God. Hearts and minds have been changed through the numerous conversations held on the street. But 40 Days for Life is not just about pro-life. It is about evangelisation. So many of the conversations that we had were faith-related. Now, I've always found that John Paul II's homily at World Youth Day in 1993 was incredibly inspiring for me, and it's like my life motto, and I would love to read the whole thing to you tonight. Obviously, time doesn't permit me to do that. So I'd just like to pull a couple of paragraphs out of that homily. Do not be afraid to go out on the streets and into public places like the first apostles who preached Christ and the good news of salvation in the squares of cities, towns and villages. This is no time to be ashamed of the gospel. It is the time to preach it from the rooftops. Do not be afraid to break out of comfortable and routine modes of living in order to take up the challenge of making Christ known in the modern metropolis. It is you who must go out into the byroads and invite everyone you meet to the banquet which God has prepared for his people. The gospel must not be kept hidden because of fear or indifference. It was never meant to be hidden away in private. It has to be put on a stand so that people may see its light and give praise to our Heavenly Father. Jesus went in search of the men and women of his time. He engaged them in open and truthful dialogue, whatever their condition. As the Good Samaritan of the human family, he came close to people to heal them of their sins and of the wounds which life inflicts, and to bring them back to the Father's house. This, I believe, encapsulates what 40 Days for Life is about and what all prayer outside the abortories is. Only God knows the true outcome of our public daily witness to life and truth, but we know our presence impacted many, many lives. I want to thank all of you who participate in 40 Days for Life. There are a number of people here tonight who were there, who gave up their time and their busy, busy lives to come and pray. And it's not easy standing on the street, but they have been a light to the world in this dark. You people have loved the innocent babies who have been rejected and forgotten by their own mother. You have loved the mothers, you have loved the fathers, you have loved the clinic workers. You have been a sign of hope. And we're looking forward to many more people joining us for the 2015 40 Days for Life Vigil. You need to know that abortion is a really major issue to consider in this year's election, and I don't want to make this about politics, but it is such a major issue. The Abortion Law Reform Association of New Zealand, Young Labour, Family Planning, and the Greens, as well as many other groups, are all working to liberalise our abortion law. Professor David Ferguson, whose research team found abortion does present a small increase in mental health issues in women, is now using this as a reason to support liberalisation of our abortion law. He believes that we should allow abortion on demand for social reasons, such as economic pressures or lack of support. How this cares for the health of women, I have no idea, but it seems that choice trumps the mental health of women. Following on from abortion, I just want to talk briefly about a push for contraception. Currently, there is a massive push for long-acting reversible contraceptives in our young girls in particular, and in women of all ages. These are commonly referred to as LARCs, and one of the most popular one is Jadel. It's a 2-rod implant that goes in the arm, and it releases hormones over a 4 to 5 year period. Of course, there are also IUDs, which they seem to be pushing even more, and the Depo-Provera injection, which is banned in lots of countries because it's so dangerous. Each of these methods of birth control act in a way that can potentially cause the demise of a newly conceived human being. In this way, many thousands more babies are aborted each year through the use of these so-called contraceptives. Do not be fooled by recent rhetoric that says that these methods do not cause early abortions. Back in 1965, the definition of when pregnancy begins was changed to mean at implantation rather than at fertilisation. Fertilisation, of course, is when a new human being comes into existence with its own DNA. Changing the definition of pregnancy or conception means that the first 6 or so days of a person's life doesn't seem to matter anymore, and that allows people to be fooled into thinking that they can use abortifacient contraceptives, undergo IVF and embryo experimentation without ending the life of a human being. Any drug or device that works to prevent that newly conceived life finding its home in the womb has the potential to cause an early abortion. In the case of IVF, unwanted embryos are discarded. These are our forgotten children. Euthanasia and assisted suicide are a large bomb ready to explode. Marianne Street's end-of-life choice bill was withdrawn from the ballot last year. However, she vows to resubmit it after the elections take place. Her proposed bill was full of loopholes. Disturbingly, one clause gave anybody that participated in a euthanasia or assisted suicide immunity from prosecution if they didn't follow the letter of the law. So basically, you could get away with just about anything. Donald DeMarco reminds us that compassion can be a bridge either to despair or to hope, as a mere feeling that seeks to remove the sufferer since it finds suffering unacceptable. Compassion leads to despair. As a virtue rooted in love, compassion leads to another virtue rooted in love, hope. Shortly, our comprehensive publication on euthanasia and assisted suicide will be available, and it's really comprehensive. It goes through so many things, so look out for that. sex education, the push for schools to provide a universal, comprehensive sexuality curriculum is very strong. In light of recent events, it has been suggested that this sexuality education become compulsory, which means that parents will no longer have the opportunity to remove their children from these classes. And it also means that a child who finds the material offensive cannot remove themselves from the classroom, which they can do now. Family planning are deeply involved in this, as they are with our student health clinics. We must be teaching our children the virtues of chastity, and it has been great to see so many parishes adopting the theology of the body programs. Since the last Eucharistic Convention, marriage has been redefined in this country. Marriage now is seen to be the public recognition of a committed relationship between two adults for their fulfilment. It's a selfish act. It could be argued that this definition has been in existence for quite some time, and the law change only legitimised that what everyone believed anyway. But marriage really is an institution that unites a man and a woman with each other and any children born of that union. Marriage is a communion of love. Children do best when mum and dad are married, and they do best with a mum and dad, not two mums, not two dads. We must continue to fight for real marriage. We must do so because the current definition and legislation is leading us down a path of destruction, which includes threats to our religious freedom. We could go on about that subject for quite some time. There are a lot of horrible, terrible things happening in our beloved country, and attacks are coming strong and they're coming fast, and sometimes it's very overwhelming. But in the darkness, there is hope. Remembering today is Anzac Day and the heroic actions of those who fought for the common good, I put to you that we are fighting a new war, a war that involves our freedom of religion, the dignity of the human person, the protection of marriage and family, and the innocence of our children. Today we need modern-day heroes who are willing to make sacrifices and to fight without ceasing for the truth. As Catholics, it is our duty to recognise that these attacks on life, faith and family are of a spiritual nature first. It is a battle for souls. It is an attack on the author of life himself. We can act and serve with love when we recognise this. Only after seeking the guidance of the Holy Spirit, immersing ourselves in the great gift of the Holy Eucharist, both through Holy Communion and Eucharistic adoration, and by praying the Holy Rosary, can we draw the strength and the necessary graces to truly be God's hands and feet on this earth. This situation, John Paul II tells us, with its lights and shadows, ought to make us all fully aware that we are facing an enormous and dramatic clash between good and evil, death and life, the culture of death and the culture of life. We find ourselves not only faced with, but necessarily in the midst of this conflict. We are all involved and we all share in it, with the inescapable responsibility of choosing to be unconditionally pro-life. I am often asked, what is the answer? Christ, of course, is the answer. St. Augustine's famous quote, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee," describes the restless hearts of society's young and old. Always searching, they look in the wrong places, thinking freedom comes from being able to do as they please and having dominion over themselves. Yet true freedom comes from aligning our will with God's. A massive shift in thinking is required by the world. It is a shift that can be taken by everyone when practical and reasoned approaches are taken that appeal to that innermost natural law that is written on each person's heart. However, ultimately, if it is to take hold and really bear fruit, it must be rooted in a conversion to Christ. Therefore, If we are to really bring about a culture of life, we must start in our own communities, our own parishes, our own families. It can be done, I believe, one parish, one community at a time, but it takes commitment, it takes faithfulness, and it takes great faith and trust in God. Each of us, at some point, must make a decision to be unconditionally pro-life. Every day we make decisions that lead to life or death. For the single person, it is choosing to be chaste. For the married couple, it is being open to life and rejecting artificial methods of birth control or sterilisation. For the young single girl who finds herself pregnant, it is accepting the responsibility of her and the consequences of her actions. For her parents, it is to embrace her and love her and support her and help her bring her child to birth. For the sick and elderly, it is choosing to offer up their illness or difficulties of old age and not succumbing to the temptation to end their lives early. Each time one of us makes a choice for life, we rebuild the culture. While much has already been done by so many people throughout the years, I believe that the time has come for a revolution, and it will take each one of us to take that on. We need our youth with all their enthusiasm and joy. We need our older people with all their wisdom and experience. We need our families who are the first teachers of their children and who courageously live lives of culture of life and love in their home. I believe our schools and medical professionals, our politicians, they all have a great responsibility to speak the truth and to remove everything they can that leads to a culture of death. Our Catholic schools must teach sexuality in the context of the truth and meaning of human sexuality. They must not buy into the secular view. It leads our children to destruction. They must teach our children the true faith. Doctors and midwives must not refer for abortion or sterilisation. Catholic doctors must have the courage to teach natural fertility regulation and not to hand out contraceptives. Our politicians must uphold the dignity of the human person from conception through to natural death. They need to be writing and promoting legislation that promotes this. We need our religious and priests to lead, to teach and to encourage, all the while speaking the truth of the gospel. Thank you to all of you who do this and more. Your efforts are making a difference. Let us work together because we can bring about change. Together we can bring the light of Christ to the world, Christ who is our hope, Christ who is the answer to the present culture of death. Be not afraid. Let us ask for the intercession of John Paul II, the great apostle of life, and our Blessed Mother of Guadalupe as we embrace the challenge to proclaim the culture of life. Let us pray. We just join in and pray the great prayer for life that John Paul II left us. Too small. Is it too small? I'll pray it. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast number of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and the sick, killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build, together with all peoples of goodwill, the civilization of truth and love, to the praise and the glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. There's copies of that at the Family Life table. Thank you.